Welcome to the Wolf and Bull podcast. I'm your host, the Wolf. And additionally, I also have my co-host, the Bull.
The Bull. The Bull is here.
And yet again, we have a wonderfully special episode for our audience. Joining us today are two special guests, Dave Porter, partner and executive recruiter from Orion Solutions, and Edward Klobucher, current city manager of Hazel Park in Michigan. Welcome to the Wolf and Bull podcast, gentlemen.
Thank you for having me here.
Now, just a quick reminder for our audience, if you like what you hear and you see, you can find all of our content and follow it on Instagram. Additionally, a subscription on YouTube would be greatly appreciated. And finally, a 5-star review on all the major listening platforms would also be much obliged.
And even if you don't like what you see, comment.
Exactly, comment. Leave your opinions, your thoughts, any of that would be greatly appreciated. Now, before we jump into the monologue, Dave, Ed, I'd love for our audience to know a little bit about our guests. Could you each provide a brief background on yourselves and anything about yourself that you think our audience would like to know?
You know what? I'll go first. My name is Ed Klobucher. I'm the city manager in Hazel Park. First of all, I have to do the disclaimer. Anything said today are clearly my opinions and my opinions alone and do not reflect official policy of the city of Hazel Park. That out of the way, I've been city manager for about 20 years. Prior to that, I was a psychotherapist, a deputy sheriff, and I taught a class called Introduction to Future Studies in the late 1990s at Madonna University. And I've always been interested in the future and the benefits that we could realize by utilizing advances in technology to make life better for the average human. So that's where I'm coming from.
Very good.
That's good.
Great. Well, my name's Dave Porter. Whatever I say does represent the views of the city of Hazel Park.
Thank you, Dave. All right.
So I'll get Ed and the city in trouble here. My background is in freight transportation. Did that for 30 years. Went to school with the Bull, Western Michigan University.
Go Broncos.
Go Broncos. MBA, University of Redlands. I've been in trucking, different forms of transportation. Currently in executive recruiting in the logistics space. And I am just a reader and listener of podcasts and watcher of YouTube videos about, future thinking. I really enjoy that space.
Awesome.
Very
awesome.
cool.
Well, we appreciate having both of you on the show. I think it's going to be a really good conversation.
Great.
Yeah, I got a feeling this subject, Wolf, is kind of tailor-made for three tail end of the boomer generation. Because, we kind of want to live forever. And we've already taken over the world in one aspect, so we just want to kind of continue that, right?
That's fair. Yeah, I should probably make it aware to our audience. I should probably say that I am skeptical of some of these things. I would identify as being a humanist, not a transhumanist, so I have my apprehensions in relation to the discussion we'll be talking about today. I know that I'm probably in the minority, so that's totally fine with me. But
we'll convert
what is your position?
We'll convert you.
You're going to convert me?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Because, you can be a humanist and still believe in the fact that the human process or adventure through time changes significantly as we change technologies and learn more about what it means to be human, but what it means to extend that human, nature.
Yeah, I think it's base. We don't lose our humanism. It's just amplified through technology. At our core, we are these beings that evolved over millions of years, and now we're just going to have all kinds of great tools. And I think as boomers, it's going to be super interesting because a lot of boomers don't like this stuff at all. In fact, Wolf, I'm surprised you're not the one that's jumping all over this stuff. To me, it's not if, it's when. That's the only argument.
Yeah.
I don't think you can argue that this stuff's never going to happen. We can argue whether it's going to be 2029, 2045, or 2100, but it's going to happen. I'm convinced of that.
Well, I think there's go ahead, Ed.
No, I think Dave is right. That it's happening is a foregone conclusion. It's only a matter of when. And I think everybody thinks it's beneficial to have a longer health span, live longer, feel healthier, get more out of life. And these emerging technologies have the chance to actually make some of those things happen. So we're starting to see real tangible results from it just recently. So like I said, I think you're going to be pleasantly surprised and converted. You may not like the fact that us old guys are going to be around a little bit longer than you hoped for or anticipated. But, I think that might make everything better.
So we'll get to it in a second. So we'll jump into the monologue really quick. I want to make it very clear. I'm not against technological advancements. Like I am very much on board with it. I just don't trust the entities pushing them. That's where I'm coming from. I'm very skeptical. I think that there's going to be
a dark side here waiting for all of us, right?
I think we would all agree with that. There's a potential.
And that's what I'm apprehensive about.
So is Darth Vader good? Is Darth Vader bad?
Right.
Depends on the movie.
That's right.
Yeah, exactly.
It depends on, are you watching Terminator, iRobot, or what are you watching?
WALL-E, so that's kind of where I'm at. But we'll see. But let's go ahead and jump to the monologue. I'll give our listeners a quick kind of, background of where I think that I'm coming from on this. And plus it'll give us some nice futuristic ambience as well. 400 years from now, mankind is strung across a region of interstellar space inherited from an ancient civilization discovered on Mars. The colonies are linked together by the occasional sublight colony ship voyages and hyperspatial data casting. Human consciousness is digitally freighted between the stars and downloaded into bodies as a matter of course. As much as that sounds like an incredible forecast of the future, it's merely an equally incredible book synopsis of Altered Carbon, a wonderful science fiction novel written by Richard K. Morgan and fumbled by Netflix Studios, unfortunately. Humanity tends to forecast what the future will be, sometimes with striking accuracy. Pop culture predictions from The Simpsons and Back to the Future have eerily striking accuracy. On the contrary, the speculative future and mostly hyperbolic Nostradamus-like predictions are a dime a dozen, popularized for the sake of your dollar and sometimes your voting preference. What happens, though, when our bodies escape the natural barriers imposed by them at birth? Strengthened by technology-enhanced bones, muscles, and brains. Per stem cell research, we've already eclipsed many mortal barriers once thought to be impossible, and it's likely that we'll continue our eclipsing in the name of science. Would it be possible to live forever? The real question that I personally have is not so much about how technology will eventually meld with humankind, but more to do with what will happen when it will. For those who haven't read or seen it, Altered Carbon artfully explores the erasure of its protagonist's humanity as he progresses forwards into his dystopian future, living another quote-unquote life as one ends. Would our personal experience be that much different? In a time when it seems as if society has increasingly isolated itself, would a transition into a cyber-based or technologically extended reality present much of a difference? Or would it merely divide us further into the void created by our social betters? Today, we'll discuss longevity escape velocity and how humanities eventually merge with technology that could impact all of us.
Very well done. I like that very much.
Very well done.
I do see the dark side, though. I see the dark side coming out of you
there.
Not
to. A little bit, yeah.
I mean,
it's hard to not see it sometimes, but I'm just a cynic.
I think, Ed or Dave, you said it a moment ago. These things there's an inevitability here to this prospect. And I believe the real debate is around, is there a genetic ceiling to the possibility of how many years on this planet we have? Is there, or is that something we can punch through? But if you look at historically, for instance, at the time of the Roman Empire, the average lifespan was about 20 years old.
Right.
At the turn of last century, the average lifespan was about 40 years old. It's about 80 now, for the Western civilization at least. And these things, I mean, you can talk about infant mortality and how that's, an aspect of looking at the actuarial tables on something like that. But the reality is even the idea of lowering infant mortality is a technological advancement. It's a medical advancement. So that's just one of a whole litany of things that have happened since these ages have been expanding. And they're going to continue to. I mean, we have digitalized the genome. That, to me, was like the first. I never thought they would even do it. I remember, but when did they start that? 96 or something like that? 99, something like And it took them a long time. And now you can send something away and get that done for yourself.
Yeah.
I mean, it's crazy.
And the cost,
a few $100.
Yeah, the cost has gone down dramatically. It used to be, tens of thousands of dollars to sequence a genome. Now, like Dave said, a couple $100. So one good thing about that is it does appear that as these technologies become more prevalent, the price comes down, making them more accessible to everybody else. So hopefully that's a trend that continues.
And think about what we are just hopefully winding down now through this COVID situation. And I don't want to get into a debate on whether vaccines are good or not, but the reality is in the U.S., through this advanced CRISPR technology, we had the vaccine developed before the first case was known in the U.S. Now, it took them a while to go through testing and get it out there and manufactured at scale. But think about that. I think it was it the 1918? Was that the Spanish flu?
Spanish flu, yeah.
It wiped out 50 million people, right? And we got this thing, a lot of controversy, and you can debate.
That's a different podcast entirely,
and so forth. But the reality is, we came up with the cure in a month. Month.
You know what, Dave? You called it a vaccine, and I think that's actually going to stop being called that in the not too distant future. Because if you look at the technology behind the manufacture of the mRNA vaccine, it's a program. It's it's a distribution of code into our biologic system. That is different than all other vaccines previously. We can debate the efficacy of it and whether it should have happened when it did and all that other bullshit. Doesn't matter. But the fact is I think that science in general, I hate using that word ubiquitously, but I think science in general and the movement toward longevity is looking at each of us as a biologic form of data. That's what we are now. And so we can change that data with alterations to our program. And that's where these things are going.
Well said. That's it. Exactly.
Yeah, we're O's and ones now, right? And we saw the dramatic, and you've seen these, exponential growth tables. Ray Kurzweil has popularized it. The computing power of a $1,000 computer, and it's like this hockey stick, right? And next year, very interestingly, in terms of computing power, a $1,000 computer will equal in power, processing power, a human mind. And then in about 20 years after that, one $1,000 computer will equal the processing power of all human minds combined, right?
But we're just
seeing that around that.
We're seeing that with cell phones. I've got more computing power in my iPhone than NASA had when they launched Apollo 11 and went to the moon. So we're seeing that, and these new mRNA vaccines, that's another manifestation of that. I was just watching the podcast yesterday, and they were talking about how they think they're going to be able to use this technology to have a much better treatment for all different types of cancer within the next decade, because they can utilize this programming capability to tailor medicine for specific individuals. That's kind of amazing.
You know what, Ed? The challenge there, though, that I see is that, three of us on this podcast remember MS-DOS, right?
Right.
I do. Right. I remember trying to code with that stuff when I was at university. And literally, and Dave, you remember, I was like the only person I knew that had a dummy terminal in my room in one of those stupid phones.
On the leading edge of tech. He's the only dude in the dorm with his own computer.
What was that? What was that one movie with Matthew Broderick? Was that you? Was that you? When you hacked into the nuclear code of the United States in the 80s?
Oh, I told you never talk about that in public, Cam. Never. No, but the point is this stuff is, as much as I love to think of us all as technologically advanced, and we're certainly moving in tremendous directions, and the hockey stick curve that you talked about is there and all that, we're still don't understand the complexities that are coming our way. We're still in MS-DOS time. We haven't figured out Windows, whatever, and all the, and on top of that, just using that as an analogy, we also know that there's a dark side out there. and that there's a million bad players for whatever reason, whatever. I don't even understand why hackers do things for the most part, but it's almost all economic, I'm sure. And that's going to be part of this growth process. So as much as I'd like to think there's this curve straight up into immortality, it does never happen. It just does not going to happen that way. There's going to be all kinds of fits and starts, and there's going to be some dark sides to this.
My only point with the processing power, I think it's a good framework to think about where we're starting to go with kind of the digitization of biology and what we're going to continue to see with all over the economy, all over our world, all over our experience, from artificial meats. I think that in the future we'll look back at the idea that we raised and killed these animals to have meat is like we were like freaking cavemen, and the way we treated those animals, that's just not going to happen. We're just going to grow meat. And I think we've kind of been the same. We've had a lot of progress over the last, 20, 30, 40 years. But if you think about between the year 2000 and 2050, the change we're going to see compared to the change that we saw between, say, 1600 and 1650,
it's huge.
Before, the parents would basically have the same life as the kids. And we are programmed to think linearly, like that's just the way it's going to continue to go. Just a wee bit of progress. We'll have a sharper stick, by the time we pass on. But we're living in an exponential world. People can't get their heads around that, and certainly our government can't, and that's causing all kinds of problems.
Honestly, Dave, I would 100% agree with you on all of that. I think that a lot of the indicators that have come with technology, quality of life obviously is really hard to measure, but over the last 500, 600 years, it has gone way up. We can talk about, ownership of things in relation to like TVs and technology. Obviously the benefits for things getting more advanced, to argue against it would be silly. And I don't think that's the position that I hold. I think the position that I'm kind of coming from is I just don't trust the powers that be to take these things responsibly. Be it from whatever administration is in office, left, right, center, doesn't matter, or Taco Bell. Like, I don't think that these companies or these organizations have the innate ethical capacity to separate the benefit of technological integration for humanity, and I'll get into the definitional for our listeners, the definition of longevity, escape velocity, all that. I don't think they're able to separate themselves from the benefit as opposed to the benefit that only seeds to them. That's where I come
the
from.
Abuse of this is what you're focused on, and I think Taco Bell's lost its chance to be the head corporation like it was in Blade Runner. But having said that, there will be something, right?
Nor will they be a sponsor of this show after this discussion.
Right.
That's exactly right.
In Demolition Man, all restaurants are Taco Bell.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, my favorite scene is from the movie Idiocracy with Luke Wilson, where like this lady is trying to get food for her children, and eventually I think it was Carl Jr. takes responsibility and ownership of her children, which I think is hilarious. So that's kind of where I'm coming from. But for our listeners, longevity escape velocity was originally coined by this is a word, it's a big word, biogerontologist Aubrey de Grey in a 2000 paper, which was the concept of longevity escape velocity. And that has been around since the 1970s. I think you, Dave, you mentioned Robert Anton, or no, you mentioned Ray Kurzweil. Robert Anton Wilson's essay, Next Stop, Immortality, is where longevity escape velocity comes from. It's also referred to as actuarial escape velocity, and it's a hypothetical situation when one's remaining life expectancy, not life expectancy at birth, is extended longer than the time that is passing. So per that definition, once L.E.V is imposed or maintained upon someone, technological advances would increase people's remaining life expectancy more than the year that just went by when it came to research. So it's very interesting to me.
Kind of a simple way to think about that, just for illustrative purposes, is currently, or within the last couple of years, the technology advancements, medically primarily, but overall in general, in about a 10-year period of time, our lifespans increased on average 2.5 years. Okay. Mm-hmm. So the whole idea of this L.E.V, or what was it called? The Methuselian. I can never pronounce this correctly, but the singularity for the Methusian singularity or something like that. Somebody else can pronounce it better than me, but that is when this advancement doesn't take 10 years anymore. It takes 1 to increase your lifespan by a year
or more,
because then it never catches up, right? So the technologies advance at a rate faster than your life does. So that means your expansion of life continues. And I think the baseline thought that I have on this, and we can debate this, because I look at aging, and I have always looked at this way, even before looking into this and everything else. Maybe it's my old Omni days at the university reading that darn magazine before it became Discover. But I've always looked at aging as kind of the ultimate disease, right? It's what takes us all out.
And I think that attitude is very important for the future. People need to look at aging as the ultimate disease because it's what is responsible for so many other maladies that come along as we, live our lifespan. The older we get, the more susceptible we come to everything from cancer, heart disease. There's so many things that happen when we get older. If we were to be able to cure aging, we would have the side benefit of being, or I should say, treat aging. We would have the side benefit of a dramatic reduction in a lot of those other killers. So, and that's it.
Have you
looking at it as a disease?
Yeah, I don't know if you've read any David Sinclair's stuff. He has
absolutely.
I think it's called Lifespan. So it's funny. You look at this guy. I think David Sinclair's like 52 right now. He looks like he's 38 years old. As opposed to Aubrey de Grey, who looks like Methuselah. But it's very interesting, and there's some brilliant physicists that don't seem to have an agenda or even necessarily a particular profit motive that discuss this stuff. And there's some really compelling experiments that have been done. Granted, it's on mice and nematodes and things like this that would indicate that, that it is certainly possible for life forms to achieve this. Now, we're not there with humans yet, but for us, the trick is, I'm a little bit jealous of my grandson, for example, because I think he'll be able to get full benefit of this stuff. For us, we'll probably be lucky to hold at 70, if we could get there, right?
Go ahead, Ed.
You were mentioning David Sinclair and talking about him, and his book is great. I recommend that to anybody who's watching or listening to the podcast to get that book. But the cool thing with that is they recently did the regeneration of the eye, and that itself is proof in a mouse, and that is proof of concept that this actually can be done. So we've actually seen it. It's not theoretical. Certainly, right? It's a mouse. Thank God for the mouse and all those, rodents who have made those sacrifices on our behalf over time. But the proof of concept is there. It's actually been done. So we know it's possible. Now it's just what's the right technology and how do we get it right to do that for humans?
Yeah. Well, it's kind of amazing stuff. And I think the real debate is, okay, if you're going to live to 200 years old, are you going to look and feel like you're 200 years old, or are you going to look and feel like you're 30 years old? That's the real issue. And there's as much or even more technology kind of looking at, it's almost like it's taking a two-prong approach. It's the science is going after repair in one aspect. So all these things that have already happened to us as human beings need to be repaired in some way, shape, or form. And then the second is rejuvenation, like you talked about with the eye, right? Gene therapy of some kind, replacement in the genome of bad sequences in DNA, things like that, and a whole lot of other stuff, rejuvenation processes. And you can look to the animal world for that as well. I mean, a salamander, cut off its tail, and it's going to grow back, right? So why is that? So let's look into why that is. So there's something going on there in its genetic ability that allows it to regenerate. So if it can be done like that, why can't it be done for an organism as a whole? And that's where we're headed.
Well, I think the other interesting aspect of this is just monitoring and maintenance. And I also think, just like we'll look back in time and think that we were cavemen for the way that we ate and treated animals, the idea that oh, I had a heart attack, and I had no idea that I was in this kind of physical condition, and I die. And just complete surprise, that is also going to be a relic of the past as well, because we will have within our veins roaming around nanobots, monitoring and repairing things at all times, reporting out what we need to do, actions that need to be taken. Now, it may be that humankind does not have the willpower, because 90% of all people are obese or overweight right now. So they choose not to do things that they know are good for them anyways. You don't need a nanobot to tell you that you shouldn't weigh 300 pounds. But we're going to have much better monitoring of our current state and internal repairing real time that'll solve a lot of these issues.
Yeah, I mean, when you go back to Kurzweil's book, The Singularity is Near, he outlined how you could use nanotechnology to actually be in your bloodstream. And if, God forbid, you had a heart attack or your heart stopped, those nanomites or nano robots could actually oxygenate your blood until you could be repaired. So, I mean, these things are being developed right now. They're working on that.
From a medical perspective, the benefits are like unprecedented medically. So I like having like family in the medical industry. I totally understand how this would make not only their jobs incredibly easier, but people's lifespans longer and the way they interact with each other different to a degree. Bull. You mentioned two benefits, right? The rejuvenation, and then what was the other one?
I was talking about repair and rejuvenation.
Repair and rejuvenation.
Yeah, two sides of the same coin.
I would say there's a 3 and a 4 benefit-wise that no one wants to talk about because it makes this entire conversation kind of unethical. One, I think it's evolution. I think this is humans moving from humans into something else that we have speculative observations on, but not outside of what we can do with mice and with that, nothing with a human quite yet. And there obviously will be. And then thirdly, I think is eventually the ultimate transition in this area, which comes to the invasion of people's personal autonomy, which is where I'm coming from. I think that if we were to keep this completely medical, great, let's do it. Like if we can keep it purely medical, great, let's do it. But things like Neuralink, as much as I love Elon Musk, Daddy Muskie, I really have a problem with that particular thing because I just don't think people will even consider the unethical nature of it. I just don't. I think they'll blow right by it.
There's obviously privacy issues amongst any new technology that comes out.
Privacy. Autonomy issues.
Autonomy, privacy, all that kind of stuff. You can talk about AI, you can talk about nanotechnology, you can talk about all the medical stuff that comes about and is mandated instead of encouraged or vice versa. You could go off in a million different directions on this. What ends up kind of the bottom line for me is kind of your decision on where your priorities lie, where your risk tolerance is, what is your end goal. If you're nearly 60, which is me, and you don't mind the idea of 150, then you're like, well, okay, do I care about the nanobites in my blood? Not really, because
that depends if they're your nanobites.
Excuse me?
That depends on if they're your nanobites. Same with Neuralink. Is that ownership of that particular device yours, or are you owned now by quote unquote Taco Bell?
Well, the question is what is the advantage for me versus the disadvantage? That's what I'm saying. So
do you have a smartphone?
I do, yeah.
I know you do. So imagine particularly a high schooler or a college student that did not have a smartphone. Mm-hmm. You almost literally would not have a social life. You would not be able to, so we have surrendered our social lives, and, every time you download an app, you accept 20 pages, you're giving up all your rights. That's just the way it goes. Yeah. And they can do whatever they want, more or less. And I believe it will be the same way with being jacked into the cloud. If you can choose not to do it, no one has to have a cell phone, but you won't have a social life. And if you choose not to augment your brain power with the collective information that's out there, you'll be virtually unemployable for interesting jobs. You'll be like a dog.
See, that's not choice.
You'll be like a dog compared to, you just won't even be able to communicate. You'll be like at a different level, Well,
so see, this is
so I think
this is the problem that I have with it then, because that's not really a choice. That's like the red or blue pill question, right? Without the matrix being an exit. Like you take the red or the blue pill, you're still taking the pill that's presented to you from the party that's presenting it to you. So I guess my whole thing is it's like, I see that you're 100% correct. I see the powers that be to say, okay, well, our president now has a Neuralink. All of our politicians have Neuralinks. Every single citizen that's supposedly a citizen of the United States now has Neuralinks. They don't really need to be born here to be citizens. They just need to get a Neuralink. And then that's a total invasion of, in my personal perspective, ethics. Just across the board, because we can talk about the phone. The phone is still a choice because, yeah, actually you can still make friends without a phone. You might not have as interesting as a social life, but you can still talk to people. You can still be seen as a human. But with this type of stuff, I see this as the quote unquote social specials becoming more specialer and then saying, well, we don't want people to be a part of our special group. So we're going to be the specials and they'll be the unspecials. And then they're not going to have the same benefits. They're not going to have the same wealth, all that jazz. So they already did it with the last 2 years. Already.
So,
100%
Wolf,
did it.
I think you're 100% right. So are you, Dave. So the question is, how do we solve this problem and bridge this gap? And we make sure that this technology is working for us and it is enhancing our autonomy and our ability to make choices and our ability to live the lives that we want as long as we want, the way we want, as opposed to being, enslaved by the technology. And we have to look at that. And as we progress in the future, what is the solution? Maybe one thing might be a reform that we own our own data. Because right now, Dave's right. If you got this cell phone is collecting data on you all the time. The algorithms are choosing for us what we get to see in our feeds and things like that through social media. So, if we could, the one reform, I think, if we could own our own data, that would be helpful. And we could take that principle and translate that through almost all of these other technologies, because we all want the technologies to enhance our ability to have more autonomy and be who we want to be as long as we can be that and be better than who we are now. But right now, and there's truth to what you say, but Dave Porter is dead on right when he says if you aren't connected to these things, you don't have access to it, you will fall behind.
Don't we see that as negative though? I mean, because I
think it's a pipe dream, actually. Part of that is because
data
how
is
do
a
you?
Great idea, but I don't think
I could tell you tomorrow that you own your own data, but you don't.
Monitor it?
I mean, the insurance companies, you have life insurance, health insurance, all that kind of stuff, and they evaluate your risk without knowing all your data. They get a few vital signs, they take some blood samples, et cetera, and they go know a little bit about you. They don't know who you are. They don't know your life experience, et cetera. So you own what your life has been. But the actuaries have a very solid guess on who you really are because they have a collection of data over historical people that are similar enough to you to decide. So I agree with you that owning your own data is a big part of it, but I think it's, when I say a pipe dream, that's probably the wrong way to put it. I think it's a big ask. I think there's Oz behind the curtain is what there is. And they're giving you a curtain to make you feel better. And that's the dark side. I truly believe there's plenty of that goes on because ultimately people in power, they don't want to be out of power. They want to stay in power. They want to grow their power. They want to use their power for the betterment of their small circle. I don't begrudge them that. That's kind of the way humans have always been. The question again comes down to what is my need? How do I evaluate wanting to live longer versus being a slave to the technologies that got me there? That's what it comes down to.
I think it's a tool. It's simply a tool that can be used or abused just like this. You can use this to subscribe to, let me pick two extremes, right-wing crazy social media or left-wing socialist, communist or whatever, and that forms your paradigm, or pornography or something that's really intelligent, right?
Which also forms your paradigm. So
all of it,
yeah. And so there's going to be competing clouds to jack yourself into, or maybe you yourself can kind of go back and forth just like a radio station, and based on, and however that works, I'm not exactly sure. But there's not going to be one monolithic cloud. And I don't believe it'll be controlled by the government, because the government, whether it's Amazon selling stuff for years online because the government had no idea this was coming, had no idea how to tax them, and finally they figured it out, oh boy, we better tax this stuff because all the retail, we're not getting those taxes anymore. Or who's developing spacecraft now? The government doesn't do it anymore. It's all private enterprise. Private enterprise is going to do this, not the government.
Well, Yeah, but we could say that that's we could say that the same because I mean with the last 2 years, not to get too preachy, it became a almost a pseudo medical form of government. Like if I don't agree with what everyone says speculatively about something that we haven't been able to test, which now surprise turns out oops, we were wrong. If I don't agree with that, then I can't travel. I'm not seen as a citizen. I don't have the same benefits. Same thing will happen with this. I honestly, humanity is not so complex that we can't predict and forecast this type of stuff. And I think, unfortunately, the benefits are really alluring. Like, I am right there with you. It'd be super cool to be able to have Neuralink in my brain, do this, and be like, okay, what is the definition of this? Or where can I look up this? Or how do I get here without having to look at my phone? Like, it'd be fantastic. With that being said, I just don't trust the entities. I simply don't. I won't. Even if they tell me that, oh, it tastes like, this is laden in Jameson, and it's laden in Middleton whiskey, and it tastes like dandelions and flowers. I would say no. No, thank you. Because we already saw what happened with a unilateral move in one direction without any apprehension at all. I mean, everyone thought that was the answer. And this seems like it's the same type of thing, except the catch is Neuralink's write capability. It says, okay, well, yeah, we'll be able to fix all the stuff in your brain, but also we're going to be able to hack into you and make sure that you vote the right way and agree with the same things that we agree with and basically revolutionize your entire personality. I mean, that's literally what they're able to do.
A lot of education, obviously, around this.
100%.
You know, the example that you give is like, well, we developed this new fix to a problem rather quickly. Because of that, people aren't used to exponential solutions. They're thinking linearly. Before, it's always taken 10 years. How can this one be ready in a month? I'm not going to trust this. At the same time, you have an uneducated government that says, hey, this is great. Just take it, even if you already had the virus, right? And there is all kinds of problems with that and plenty of reason for distrust, a real cluster. And that's because we're at an inflection point where and people don't know how to deal with the advancing technology just yet. That's the problem. So we need education. And I'm really worried about our government handling this properly because you've got these people that are in Congress till they can not even walk anymore. They're totally out of it, man. They don't know anything about this stuff, but they're making decisions for us on how it's going to be handled and managed.
Well, they'll be first adopters. So that's kind of where I'm coming from. It's like
we're
basically
so.
maybe not them. Maybe I mean
I know a lot of legislators. I don't know if they'll be first adopters. Okay, they're unfortunately, I share all of your concerns about their inability to properly manage these things because so many of them don't really know and understand how the technology works. So we're trusting them to regulate it. Yeah, that's a concern, a totally valid concern. But one of the ways I think we can help that process along is through podcasts like this, where people are actually talking about these things, and it gives everybody a chance to see what are the second or third order things that could happen on down the line if we implement this technology. So this debate that we're having here right now today helps itself to clarify those issues and make everybody more aware of it. And hopefully, maybe when these technologies come, we're a little bit smarter about how we utilize them.
Yeah, no, good point.
Yeah, 100%. And I think that if we can do it in such a way where there's no downsides,
never.
I'm on board. But it's just I just don't. Darn it, Jonesy. Darn Jonesy screaming in the background. I just don't see that happening. And the only reason I say that is because, like, as much as I love, like I said earlier, Daddy Musk coming in saying he doesn't want advertisements to come through. He wants this to be purely altruistic. Like, he think this is a benefit. I just see companies like any basic company coming in and just saying, well, yeah, we're not going to listen to you. And then, entities like China and entities that don't care about human rights coming in, abusing it, copying it, stealing it, and imposing it on the people that live within their countries.
You know what, though?
That's the danger. It's just dangerous.
The truth is human beings have always been able to take any discovery and create its best and create its worst.
Absolutely.
All you have to do is look at Alfred Nobel and have an indicator of what can happen when you decide to create dynamite, right? So, and throughout our history, there have been advancements to some degree in the way we decide to be civilized. And there's always been outlier groups that have decided they don't want to participate. I mean, you can go back to, the Amish land in Pennsylvania and watch some of that happen in today's society. You can talk about how people have immigrated from, old world Europe to the United States specifically because they changed their point of view on certain things, and those people didn't want to participate. So they said, I'm out. So I think the option is always going to be there.
Yep.
But to Dave's point earlier, the option is there, but it changes what you will be looking at in the future as your humanity, what that means to you or the group that you're in.
Or your rights.
Well, the rights part of it, I mean, if you rolled back 50 years and looked at some of the things we were determined were human rights in the United States, it's totally changed. We've given up. Sure. We talked earlier about privacy. We've literally given that completely up. I mean, anybody that believes there aren't databases out there with literally everything we've said and done, and I mean, all you have to do is, and it's been talked about a million times, but notice that next time you pick up your phone, whatever you were talking about 5 minutes ago, there's an ad for.
Well,
right?
Absolutely.
So I guess, yeah. And this is kind of where I come back to my situation, because it's like, so say for example, Neuralink gets imposed in your brain. We have the ability to revolutionize your brain, revolutionize how you think, revolutionize how you can interact with individuals, your personality, your dexterity, all that stuff. How about your mental capacity? How about the ability for you to make decisions? Well, that introduces a very unethical quandary of age discrepancy that we don't obviously want to go down as a society, as we shouldn't. With that being said, Neuralink solves the problem. I see this like it's almost like one of those things that it's such a good idea. It's such a fabulous idea that has so many benefits, but the negatives associated will require a rewrite of everything. Like, I think it would require a rewrite of like laws. It would require a rewrite of the Bill of Rights, the Constitution, all of that jazz, because we're introducing a metric that wasn't previously known, and we don't know what the measure of that metrics would be in the future. We can just speculate. That's kind of, it's just a lot.
Will be, though, again, it is a tool, and just about everybody has a computer now, whether it's a smartphone or some type of thing. Some people do amazing things. They produce podcasts, they do research, they self-educate, they learn to play an instrument, a new language, whatever. And others watch pornography. Or they just ignore it and they watch television and they don't like the computer. So I think you'll still have all those options. But for those that really capitalize on that, and become disciplined and learn how to use that tool really, really well, they're going to be at a completely different level.
Dave, first of all, I'm getting a little concerned. You've mentioned pornography like 2 or 3 times now.
There's I think, a great business opportunity there. They say like 90% of the internet is pornography.
You and Dave, I'm in.
Visit Dave on OnlyFans.com.
Yeah.
Well, hey, who here remembers the movie Sleeper?
With Woody Allen.
Woody Allen, right?
We've cloned our nose.
Where he comes alive and they torture him with Nixon film, right? And then he goes into a booth and it's a sex booth, right? So
with a 16-year-old.
Well, for his case, probably, right? and his stepdaughter at the same time. So
Yikes.
That's a whole different story, and that we could go down quite the trail there. But the interesting thing you brought up just a second ago, Wolf, is that there's a discrepancy. If we're able to, number one, mitigate the process or the progress of things that deteriorate for in our bodies. So in other words, we rust. That's how we do. We actually rust and we oxidize. We get older. We die. Yeah. So if you can slow down that process or repair things that have already been damaged in one way, shape, or form, which is what aging is damage. It's damage throughout the period of time of our lifespan. That's one thing. Okay. But again, like I said earlier, I don't want to be 200 years old and feel like I'm 200 years old. I might want to be 200 years old and feel like I'm 35. That would be awesome. Yeah. Right. But at 200 years old, you may feel like you're 35, but you have the experiences and the understanding, and you have the mental age of 200. There's the discrepancy I can't get my head around right there. Because and everybody always says, "Oh, I wish I was when I was 20, I had the wisdom I have now." I don't know. Sometimes ignorance is bliss, I think. So that's where I go. So the idea of rejuvenating the body to regress the aging process, I think, is hugely interesting to me, because it would be great to feel better all the time as you were when you were younger. But that doesn't stop your mental age from progressing at all. What do you guys think about that?
And do you I think unfortunately a lot of people, whatever age they're at, as they get older, they are just hooked into a paradigm that was developed long ago, and they have a hard time adjusting. Hey, three of the four of us are on the cusp of 60 here, right? A lot of 60-year-olds aren't capable of having this discussion. They don't even want to think about it, and it's a bunch of crazy talk, right? So those people probably wouldn't enjoy what the world's going to be like 150 years from now. I can't wait. I think it's going to be amazing. I think that the world's going to be what the other thing is people don't realize right now the world's so much better than it's ever been by almost any objective measure.
Absolutely.
And it's just going to continue to move in that direction. Yeah, there's social media to amplify where it's wrong, and there's plenty of things to fix still. But I just think that in terms of getting away from fossil fuels, this longevity, alleviating disease, all these things, life is just going to be fantastic in the future. And you just have to stay current and stay on top of this and be able to use the technology. A lot of old people won't want to get jacked into the cloud. It's like, nah, that's for Satan or something. You're not going to do it.
And what you say too about aging, it is important that there be that regenerative component to that, because I don't think any one of us want to live to be 150 if we spend the last 50 years, in a state of decrepitude. I mean, my own mom is 96 and a half years old. She still lives by herself. She still cleans her house, and she still gets around pretty well. But I've noticed in the last year, like a decline, like an almost, I'm done. I don't know why I'm still here anymore. My friends are all gone. I'm bored every day. I don't know why that I'm still here. So I think if she was feeling better, and like she's only on one medication right now, she's doing amazingly well, but she is declining a little bit. She uses a walker now a little bit. Up until last year, she never used a walker. So there is this dissatisfaction with life. So I think if there was the regenerative component, and it's also the mindset that Dave talks about, you're right. We're all excited about the future, and we all have people that we went to high school with and college with that are now, they're not functioning at a level like we are. Okay, they don't exercise every day. They're not optimistic about the future. They've unfortunately been afflicted with some diseases, or else they're already gone. So the mindset of optimism is important, and that is something I think that we need to instill in order for people to be successful adapters of this technology.
Well, I think there's a social component of this that probably needs to be ferreted out a bit. And, you mentioned it when you were talking about your mom, Ed, that, all her friends are gone, right? Mm-hmm. So one of the things about moving forward in life and expanding this longevity is that your social circle is still either in development or secure. Because loneliness will kill people as much as anything else. And I interestingly, and we did a podcast of this, what was it, last week, Wolf? I can't remember, but we were talking about the book Empty Planet and some of the things about population increase versus decline and the debate around that. And I've got a particular viewpoint on that. But down. If you go, it's definitely, we're going to peak soon. Let's put it that way.
Yeah. Right.
Yes.
You can't continue the human race unless you procreate. And when you start procreating at a rate less than replacement, you're doomed to pushing ourselves into non-existence. So this is the other side of that, right? So if you expand your length of age significantly, or except for getting run over by buses or some kind of attack or whatever else, infinitum, then you've made up for that deficit, but you've also cornered the market. Your age group becomes the biggest thing. And You're not, there's something about that. I'm not hitting the note right on that, but the idea of not creating new generations is very debilitating to me. Yeah. There's something wrong with that.
I think that would beg the question of why would you if you live so
long? That's my point of bringing it up.
Like I don't think that, I truly think that, say for example, Dave, your company, our company of neuroporn, once we get it started, I think is really going to screw with people's brains. I don't think they're going to want to have to deal with the responsibility or the headaches of starting a family. And
that's meta, right? That's the whole meta argument.
Right.
Yeah, and Mark Zuckerberg, who's definitely a human, he totally is dropping the ball on that, and I think it's going to turn a lot of people off. I mean, look, if we can somehow create like a perfect situation in which health and all that stuff is specifically mitigated by this, I'm totally on board with it. But I just don't. I see. It's just. I don't know. It creeps me out a little bit.
For the most part, I think the metaverse is a place where those that are marginalized or unsuccessful in the real world find solace and enjoyment, and they can be whoever they want to be, and that's healthy, that's unhealthy. I don't think that the average person is going to want to be strapped into something and live some alternative reality, and that I just don't think that's going to happen.
I don't know. What's the quote from Klaus Schwab? You'll own nothing and you'll be happy, right?
You'll own nothing.
And so is that something that's quoted for the masses, or is something quoted for the elite? It's not quoted for the elite. It's quoted for the masses.
No, it's definitely quoted for the masses. And I think, I don't think any one of us here would be excited by Klaus Schwab's and World Economic Forum's vision for the future there with, the Great Reset. I think these technologies, if they're applied properly, can be the antidote to that. And we need to make sure that, like I said, it's empowering the individual to achieve human excellence rather than oppressing the individual and putting him into some kind of dull, boring, awful cookie cutter existence where there's nobody that does anything great. I can't think of anything more boring and dystopian than that.
Yeah. Well, I see it as soft oppression, right? Because we can talk about people not wanting to be charged in the meta, which, Dave, I'm right there with you. I have no interest. I don't even have a VR at my house. I'm just nah, I'm good. But at the same time, soft oppression, which I would see, not soft depression, soft oppression, I would see as social media. I mean, look at the Zoomers and the millennials, highest rate of depression ever in all of humanity ever. Well, obviously in recorded medical human history. My question is, say for example, we create that ability to have social media, be bombarded with ads, be bombarded with a life that you can't have in your brain. I can't imagine that's going to be a beneficial outcome. Now, realistic optimism would suggest that we don't have a bombardment of all that stuff, but I don't know. It's just an interesting quandary, I think.
Well, I think that you'll have the opportunity to subscribe, and that's the bad thing. These echo chambers people fall into, whatever paradigm that you find alleviates your fear, which is generally what drives this kind of behavior, whether you think that side's evil or that side's evil. I think that again, with me and my social feed, now I'm not a TikTok person. I'm not Snap. I'm pretty, minimal in that regard. But it's curated. And if I'm getting stuff through, I see it once, boom, and ain't coming back. And so I get reinforced, very positive, tech forward, optimistic scenarios that empower me. Mm-hmm. I don't hear about a bunch of crazy conspiracy theory stuff on one side or the next. So I think if you're disciplined and educated and objective and curate your feed, I think it'd be very empowering.
Hopefully that's the case.
I think the challenge with that, though, Dave, is that you're curating the feed based on your present view of your outward view in perception on those things about you. And the unfortunate part these days is it seems like half the freaking conspiracies that come out 10 years ago are now mainstream, proven this and that. And see, therein lies the problem, I think, because whether you do it individually and curate your stuff, or whether you do it within a group that provides feedback that you want to hear, you're creating a personal echo chamber. And I'm not saying it's bad or good. I think it's often, and this is a conversation you and I had probably 30 years ago, put more positive in So to combat all the negative that's coming at you without you trying to put it in, right? So you're trying to balance the equation or balance the scales in a way that's going to benefit you for the direction you've decided to go. Which goes back to my argument at the very start of this podcast, is that this is really an engagement about your own decision on what's good or bad for you, your personal sphere of influence, your risk tolerance, your goals in life or beyond the current life we have. And your decisions are always based on those kind of things. And I love the saying, I like to think of myself as a cup half full person, but whether the cup's half full or half empty, it's still frickin' half, right? And that's the reality. And people look at that half full glass and they decide whether the part that's missing is dark or light. And I don't want to be Pollyanna. I want to expect that things bad can happen because they always do. But I also want to move forward in a way that says, for the most part, the good is going to outweigh the bad.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, I mean, who am I to say? There's other people that seem reasonably intelligent that could make a very compelling argument that your feed should be curated some other way, right? And at the end of the day, that's all emotionally driven. But that's going to be a challenge. We have that challenge right now and it's causing lots of problems in our society.
People pattern match and they look for, and the algorithms from social media themselves help you pattern match because, you clicked on this. Okay, well, we can tell now that you are a conservative Republican. You are of this age demographic. So we're going to put more and more of what you like in your feed. So you'll click on it and it'll become more popular and it'll be more marketable. So, they are manipulating us already. Obviously, these algorithms are collecting the information and they're giving us what they think we want. So, Bull, you do make an important point. I think it's important for us to step outside of our comfort zone and all the things that we really like to hear all the time that reinforces what we think and take a look at some of the other perspectives just in case we might be a little bit wrong. Right. And and you also mentioned about it's all about our own personal level of what we're comfortable with. And you brought up the Amish, and of course they have turned away from automobiles and computers and all kinds of different technologies. But one of the things, I just read this yesterday, that they are now interested in is the advances in genetic engineering, because obviously as a population, they're very susceptible to certain genetic abnormalities because let's face it, their dating and mating pool is small. Okay, and those things are going to be. I'm trying to be politically correct. How you're going to pull that off? Their dating and mating pool is small, so they need to be aware of that. So all of a sudden, they've passed on all of these technological advances that you and I take for granted, but they're concentrating on this one because for them it could be a matter of survival. So again, there's a lot of benefit, but the key thing here that I keep going back to, and I think we all agree on, it's important that we have the autonomy to make our own decisions about it. Because I think it has the potential to be good, so we can't renounce it, even though there are potential negatives with this. And, you read a book by Mark Goodman called Future Crimes, and, all of the things that can go wrong with our technologies and the internet, and even gets into biohacking and things like that, where you could actually, hack the genome of a specific individual and create a weapon that targets them specifically. So we just saw that, with the last James Bond movie, but it's out there. There are negatives, but there's so much in the way of possible good that I think that we've got to keep chugging down the road. Just keep our eyes open and look for the potholes.
Well, there's no stopping it anyway.
There's no stopping it.
Yeah, there's no stopping it.
It's going to happen.
Yeah. I mean, look, if you three guys can moderate all of it and control all of it, I'm happy. I'm happy with it. Like everyone here, you guys all get I'll give you the money for it. You guys you can handle it. You've got an investor here that will help you. I'll be in the background and I trust the decisions there. But I don't know. It's a big ask with the ownership, and I think it's a big ask of government and a big ask specifically of individual autonomy.
Dave and I were talking a couple of different times in the last month about electric vehicles, autonomous vehicles, things like that. And I've made the point tons of times, and with you as well, Wolf, that I'm kind of an incrementalist. I like things to move a little bit slower than they do now. And Dave has made the point in this podcast and others that that's not the circumstance in which we're living in. And I think he's right about that, which kind of changes it doesn't change my point of view on what I'd like to have happen better, but it makes me understand that you can only push so hard against the realities you live in. And that doesn't mean you have to acquiesce to all of them at all. You can be contrary. You can push back and do all kinds of things differently, because we have the ability, at least in this country, at this stage in human history, the ability to do things kind of independently. But the reality is you should be able to focus on the circumstances we live in and determine how to move forward within them. I mentioned the EV truck thing. That's a perfect example. I think we're rushing headlong into that way faster than we should. And I got a feeling I'll probably be proven right, but that's beside the point. It's not the circumstances in which we live. So if everything is pointing in one direction, which this longevity escape velocity is pointing in that direction, there's a lot of arguments against it that say there's a biological number that we won't exceed because of our ability as human beings to have a period of time in which we decide to procreate. In 120 years is about that boundary limit. I think that's nonsense. I think we're going to easily blow by that. Now, whether it's in with my lifetime or not, whether there's some dark sides of this that hit first, that push us backward for a while before we move forward again, I have no idea. But it's quite obvious from the experiments going on, what we know about other biological entities and how long they live. Whales, turtles, snails, lobsters, all those. I mean, you name all kinds of things. Some of them don't even die. They actually just kind of continue. We do in a way, but we call our continuation our progeny, right? So how do we change that? That's the real question. I was reading something by a guy. His name's, I think, Jose Cordero. I don't know if you've read anything by him or seen anything by him, but
I've met him.
Oh, you've met him. There you go. So he was going on about how, cancer is kind of the key to all this. And I was like, when he said that, I was like, what? What are you talking about? Cancer is the key to this. That's what nobody wants, right? But his point is that there are somatic cells and germ cells in the body. Somatic cells die, germ cells do not. Cancer is a mutation and it does not die. And he talked about the Henrietta Lacks and the idea that cancer cells from her still live on today, even though she's been gone for 80 years or something like that. So there's a lot of investigation to be had as to why these things continue. And if something else can continue, there's no reason that we can't, that I know of from a logical standpoint.
So what you're saying is the answer is in cancer.
The answer is cancer.
Is all for us to be cancerous. That's great.
I intentionally said that so I could make a rhyme out of it.
That's beautiful. It's poetic.
It could be.
Beautiful. Yeah.
Jose's a bright guy.
That'd be very, very, very poetic.
So you met him, Ed.
I met him at a World Future Society conference back maybe 6-8 years ago. So actually met him twice. He was a regular attender at those conferences, and they were a lot of fun to attend. It was at that time, the World Future Society was a great clearinghouse on everything related to the future. And unfortunately, in the past few years, it's kind of gone in a different direction. And now I think Singularity Hub is probably the number one resource gathering area for all things future related. So, but before Singularity Hub, it was the World Future Society, and they bring together all kinds of futurists with different perspectives from across the world. And every year they would have a convention, and I had a chance to go to several of those, and they were like candy for your brain. So it was great to see that. And Jose was there regularly.
Yeah. It's interesting, Wolf, you mentioned something about this also, kind of one of the terms used other than longevity escape velocity, it's actuarial escape velocity. And it kind of made me laugh when I heard that because, when I think of actuarial tables, I always think of insurance. And what does the insurance market look like when suddenly we go from 80-year-old maximum to 160-year-old maximum? I can't imagine what the premiums are going to be like, or if they even are around, if you think you're going to live forever. Maybe what you have is just accident insurance at that point, because that's all that's going to ever kill you. I don't know.
But those are the things that I think about, is that's like the reformation of that entire industry, the reformation of a ton of different industries is what kind of pops into my brain when I think about this stuff. Because, like, look, the common dude, I don't have any concern about him. The Charles Schwabs of the world, those are the people that concern me, because they very unilaterally just kind of shifted the narrative just because they were bored. And you know, Bull, you and I have had discussions off podcast and on podcast, like how do we control these people? We can't.
We don't. It's the other
very
way around.
obvious. How do they control us? And I see that, like, this particular thing, as cool as it is, I see this as the key to them doing that unilaterally, no question. Doesn't matter what they tell us, they are not telling us the truth. I just don't see benefit for them to do that.
I don't think that those guys are going to have control of this. There's billions of dollars being put into this aside from their control, and so much is happening. They might have their philosophical bent, but they're not going to change the direction of what's happening with medical
Maybe not them
and
specifically.
autonomy and all this kind of stuff. They're just not going to change it.
Well, I see it as, you know, the obviously the good intentions, the road of good intentions lead to hell, or good intentions lead to hell. How this phrase goes. I see that as being the litmus with these individuals, because you see people like Greta Thunberg that come through and the world's ending. It's been ending since the 70s, and now it's like ending. It's real soon, and they're going to Fiji, and they're riding the planes, and they're saying, oh yeah, but only the special people can go to Fiji. My whole observation is, okay, well, they're the next generation of the Charles Schwabs, and as much as I think, you know, people like Elon Musk have good intentions, he has alternate intentions as well.
There's never a lack of you know, this kind of philosophy, or you're always going to have hypocrites, right? And from their point of view, they probably don't think they're hypocrites. That's our point of view. People can believe all kinds of things. The human nature is that is about as diverse as we are as individuals, and that's interesting. But I think, to your point, Wolf, I don't think it's about stopping the advent of these futuristic things, medically wise, or AI wise, any of that. I don't think it's about stopping it. I think it's always and always will be about power and control. And, you know, none of us here on this podcast are in power and control. There are other people and other groups that are, and their goals do not align with common human being goals of survival or length of their life or any of that kind of stuff. It's about maintaining growing power. I hate to be so negative, but that's kind of what I've always viewed a lot of these things, that there's always an umbrella over the top of everything that says we're going to manage this.
If you think about it, until the Enlightenment, really, the history of humanity was really the history of feudalism. Okay, for 6,000 years, we operated on very much a hierarchical pyramid kind of a scheme where, you know, the kings, the lords, the priests, they ate the best food, they slept with the best women, they fathered the majority of children, they always ran things, and there was always that hierarchy. It was the Enlightenment that actually tried to go from a pyramid kind of a society to more of a diamond-shaped society, where you had an educated middle class that actually could become empowered. So I see what Dave says, and I think there's an element of truth to that this technology, well, it has the potential to enslave us. It also has the potential to radically empower the individual, because now the individual can go online and he can go on to Twitter, he can go on to Facebook. At least he has a venue to express his or her opinions. Before, that never happened. So, well, there's the possibility for control. There's also the possibility maybe using this technology to put the brakes on some of those folks and their plans for control, or they may not even plan. It may just be something that happens as a result of their, desire to make money. But because we have these technologies, maybe we can do something about that, and we ourselves can become a little bit more super empowered.
Well, it's the great equalizer. It is the great equalizer for the world. And I saw a recent article about, like 15-year-old girl in Africa has more information at her fingertips than the president of the United States had 20 years ago.
Yeah,
and
but
and it's really an incredible opportunity and tool. Yeah, it can be abused. Yeah, there's people that are going to want to do evil things with it, but generally, I believe, and it's true, people are good on the whole, and I think that this is just going to take us in a very empowering direction.
I think that's a comparative observation, though, Dave. I do, because you're talking about the president 20 years ago and a person in Africa today. Well, It's not really about that. It's what is happening today here and today there. So there's always and that's my argument with this. I'm not looking for the dark side of all this either. Mm-hmm. I'm more on the side of, you got to move forward. You got to understand this is happening anyway. So how do we take advantage of it? How do we learn from it? Well, you can call it being enslaved by technology, or you can call it being empowered by technology. It's kind of the same thing. Any technology we talk about in past history, the light bulb going on, the us being able to start fire, creating the wheel, anything you want to talk about throughout history is a technology that has occurred that has both helped and put us in a position to create other things that now we can't live without that technology. Petroleum's probably the greatest example today of that. It created the society we live today in. It actually, for the last 150 years, if there was one thing that helped us become who we are today, it's energy. And that energy was based on fossil fuels. So now we're tossing that out the window as quick as we possibly can for a lot of the reasons we discussed here today. And I'm not saying that's wrong or right. I'm just saying that we became a slave to it. And the only way to get away from that empowerment and slavery of that thing that we created ourselves is to have a lot of volatility for a period of time before we get to the next thing. So what I'm saying about this extension of medical and AI and all the nanotechnology, all this kind of stuff, is that there's going to be a period of extreme volatility where there's extreme inequities worldwide, and there's always someone that's willing to manage that process and take advantage of it. That's why I said the whole Klaus Schwab thing and everything else like that. Well, not trying to be a doomsayer, but that's kind of my point of view on it.
Well, yeah, but throughout history, we're all familiar with the Luddites, right? Mm-hmm. You're exactly right. As we go through these transitions, there's going to be people that it's going to be at their expense. But it's unavoidable. It's just going to happen. We're not Luddites. It creates fear. A lot of people are going to fight change, no matter what it is. But change is coming. And so, since we know that, how do we best take advantage of it?
Yeah, and I think, Dave, you make a good point. Bull, you make a good point. And Ed, obviously, I think something to be stated, and our listeners know this, like we're pro Enlightenment ideology here. We've had multiple episodes on it. I consider myself relatively well-read about it, at least more so than the average individual. So I understand the benefits and the ideology there. Unfortunately, I see that as it is not normal in human history. And you can see that with the last few years. We've transitioned in a lot of ways away from that type of thinking. We've transitioned in a lot of ways, especially when it comes to an individualistic type existence, to something that's more collectivist. And whereas there's nothing inherently wrong about that, I don't see this particular scenario being a net positive. I see it being a net neutral right now, because I don't think we can project whether it's positive or negative, because there's so many variables. But yeah, I mean, hopefully it's exactly as Dave speculates. Because if that's the case, that's best case scenario. We'll be spacefaring individuals. We'll leave this rock. We'll go to different planets. We'll be able to coexist, and then maybe we'll be introduced to some sort of great archetype antagonist that's an alien race, and we can actually have Star Wars happen. Maybe that's the case. That would be phenomenal. I don't know if that's the case. So it's definitely a lot of variables that I think are going to unfortunately rear their ugly head, and I don't think a lot of them are going to be very good. I think some will be fantastic, phenomenal, but when it comes to the third world countries in which people might have phones that give them more access now, unfortunately, the vast majority of the world is not as Enlightenment thinking principled, and even in America right now, as much as we should be. And I think that it's going to introduce some interesting quandaries. It really will.
No doubt it will. No doubt it will. Yeah, I would view it as the great amplifier. It will amplify evil, and it will amplify good and great.
That's really a good way to put it. It really is, because that's kind of the way I see it. I mean, all these things are, I put a little list down of some of the health things that are moving forward with astronomical speed, precision medicine, personalized precision medicine. Having an understanding of each of us individually and creating things that both repair and affect our future on an individualized basis. God, nobody would have thought of that 20 years ago, really.
Yeah.
And it's here. Biotechnology, regenerative medicine, predictive medicine, genomics and robotics, preventative healthcare. I mean, it's a wellness industry that we're moving toward instead of a sickness industry, right?
Yeah.
That's kind of the idea. Gene therapy, stem cell therapy, nanotechnologies. You mentioned that earlier. 3D, 4D, 5D printing. I've never heard of the 5D printing before, but that's on my list.
I don't know what that is.
It's going to
I'm
blow
not sure
your
what
mind.
that is. That's multiple dimensional printing, perhaps. I don't know. Have you ever heard of smart dust? That was on this list.
Now
there.
I have.
I'm not sure what that is, but I'm kind of worried about it.
The
Smart
Pentagon
dust.
has been investing in smart dust for a long time. What it is, it's actually a variant of nanotechnology, and they think smart dust could be used on the battlefield to, engage in intelligence gathering operations and things like that. And again, it's a nanotechnology. I mean, you can actually manipulate things at the molecular level. So,
you know what? I think I've decided, Ed. Your Hazel
smart dust.
Park
The
city
new cocaine.
manager thing is just a cover. I can tell right now. There's something else
Right.
going on there that you can't tell us about. This security.
Jason Bourne.
But I mean, all these kind of
I'm
things.
just
And there
a
was a whole
dork
bunch
who
more.
reads a lot.
Wolf, what do you think
Yeah.
about this, man? You're the only youngster among us. You seem to be the most negative amongst us too, and
I'm not negative about it. I think it's phenomenal. I just think that I just don't, unfortunately, like I trust the people here. I think the normal person not going to abuse it, and I think the same goes for like the vaccines. Like if Billy down the street had an opportunity to create a vaccine and give it away free, he would. I mean, statistically, I think people would. I don't think those people be pulling the strings on this. I don't trust that private industry will have total control because that'd be too much of a danger to the people in power. Too much of a danger. Okay. Same thing with the like with Bitcoin, with the blockchain technology. That was supposed to be total open source. Anyone can use it. This is going to make the market better. Investment viable. Money. What happened?
that's because the existing people that control the levers of power don't want it ripped all away. So they have to figure out a way to participate in that. Yeah. And the way to participate on it is to make up their own and regulate against the current, right? That's kind of what, and I see a lot of that happening too. And I think those are things that in 100 years from now, we'll look back, and maybe it'll actually be we'll look back, because we may still be around to look back. That'd be kind of cool.
Which would be cool. Phenomenal.
So here's kind of my final question we can dive into that I've been thinking about is, everybody here on the podcast, when do we think it is? I know we've heard experts say within a certain period of time, this and that whole Malthusian singularity. Thank you very much. Malthusian. Yeah. The L.E.V. When do we think that's actually going to occur where it's a 1-for-1, where the technology is advanced enough? That doesn't mean it's ubiquitous. That doesn't mean that we all get it. But that means that the technology is advanced enough where it can overcome the year that it takes to age. Ed, what do you think?
I think that it will be variable depending on the person. Kurzweil says 2029. I think that's the date that he has on it, and there's some agreement around that with other futurists. But it doesn't mean it's going to happen for everybody. I think you're going to have to be highly disciplined and educated to capitalize on the front end of that. I'm certainly hopeful that we're going to see something like that in the early 2030s or something like that. You know what? My linear brain can't think in exponential terms like that. A lot of things are going to have to happen before we're there. But I'm thinking 2030s.
And I would agree with that. I think we'll see the first regenerative treatments. They may not be the end result. It's going to be something that we'll build on based on the research and what we see. But I think you'll see the first true, real regenerative treatments that will be offered for humans in the early 2030s.
Yeah, I would say 15 years. I would say 15 years, maybe 10 in when it comes to like actual, implementation medically. And then because of lobbying from, politicians and celebrities and people who want to live forever, 15 years. So, I think that's exactly where I think it's going to be.
So I think the answer has two questions, or the question has two answers, actually. And one is that we're already there. I think the technologies are there.
Yeah, but Ray Kurzweil says he's already there. He says that for himself.
I think the real problem is, and Dave, you alluded to this, it becomes individual or group or caste, kind of system implementation, right? So again, first adopters are going to be those with enough money, wherewithal, or that can go to a country that doesn't have the FDA standing in the way of whatever, implementation there is.
Cell therapy or something, yeah.
So the way, and a lot of that has more to do with economics than it does with true safety concerns, right? So again, to the point somebody was making a little earlier, those that are in the position of economic gain right now will probably want to slow some of these things down because they're making money on whatever's currently going on. Think about big pharma in general, right? A lot of these medical things that go on today are put in place so that they're put in place so that you have to take a pill every 30 days.
Yeah. What was the treatment? Was it cancer treatment or AIDS treatment? That one guy that got in trouble legally where it was like $2,300.
Where he started charging, thousands and thousands
of dollars. Some type of insulin. EpiPen
that's what
it was. The EpiPen.
But so some of that is going to occur, which is going to push back the date for anybody that can't afford to, fly to Switzerland and get the procedures done. Right. Yeah. So that's the real question for me, because to have that diamond structure that you mentioned earlier, Ed, you've got to get the lion's share of the populace, which is the bulge in the middle, to be able to have benefit from this. Mm-hmm. That's the question I have, because we're all in that bulge.
The good thing, I think, is that you will see, because people do want to have a profit motive, you'll see the price come down to make it more available to the average person, because we've seen that with every treatment technology that we've had. And you see the isolated things where that total shithead did raise the price of the EpiPens, but then the market and the government actually came in to play to squeeze them a little bit. And you're seeing now the price of insulin come down, some of it mandated by the government. So, there are regulators and there are potential ways where we can try to create that diamond-shaped society. There are tools that will help us. We all need to be smart enough and know what's happening. And some of it isn't going to just be about money and wealth. Some of it's going to be who's optimistic and plugged into this stuff enough to take advantage of this. I had two friends, both of whom have a whole hell of a lot more money than I had. Both of them were diagnosed with cancer. One was very proactive, got on a plane, went to the best hospital in the country. Another one probably had a little more money even, stayed home, went to the same oncologist that they were used to going to, didn't have the same result. One is still alive today, and that was the one that became proactive, got in the plane, went to the Mayo Clinic, was ready to try anything possible, spare no expense, be open to new treatment modalities. The other one, he really liked his doctor, and they had a great relationship. And unfortunately, he didn't get a great outcome. So some of this is going to come down to not just who's got the money, but who's actively seeking this stuff out and willing to try it.
Well, interestingly enough, the common denominator for both those people is they had a lot of money.
They had money.
Their decision making was different, and you have to ask yourself why the one that had a lot of money and was active, proactive about it, was able to do those traveling and everything else, and why the modalities he was using to combat his cancer, why they were the expense they were. Well, they were expense they were in part because they're not ubiquitous enough, and they're not because of the profit motive of people going the Western medicine side that's already in place. So to my point earlier, I think that you have to, it's great that there's a profit motive and that should bring the price of certain things down. Certainly it does for the, we talked about the genome project earlier and how you can get your own genome done today for a couple $100. But what happens when there's a technological advance that brings us over the L.E.V. enough that everybody can get it, if they have X amount of dollars? What's going to bring that profit down is if the people that are making enough money from that to combat what they would have made if that didn't get implemented. In other words, your cholesterol pill and your, that's the problem.
Yeah,
I don't mean the competition. I mean, what's in place now is making, the medical industry is making so much money on everything out there.
Yep.
That's what has to be looked at. That's what has to be overcome.
in a lot of these challenges, they're regulatory. You mentioned the FDA, and then there are also some intellectual property challenges, because we have patent trolls sometimes who are sitting on one kind of technology that's the missing piece for a treatment modality. So we need to make sure too that we're not letting that happen, but also that they're getting fairly compensated for the work that they put in. So it's going to become a public policy challenge for us, but the best way that we prepare ourselves for it is discussions just like this.
Exactly.
And I would say one more thing that doesn't really cost any money. To reach longevity escape velocity, let's say it's in the early 2030s, all of us here, to make it worthwhile, are going to have to exercise a lot of discipline. You cannot eat pizza every day and never exercise, and then 15 years from now, we'll all be 75 years old. You want to preserve that version of yourself, right? Now, maybe someday there'll also be pills you can take or something so you could eat all the pizza, fried chicken, and drink beer all day and never exercise and be fine. But I think the practical challenge that everybody needs to recognize, what's important to know right now, is you need to take as best care of yourself right now as you can for the next 10 or 15 years, whenever that technology is available, so you can preserve that. That is what is actionable and what we should all be doing.
Couldn't agree more.
I would say that's right on the nose.
Absolutely, positively true.
And when it comes around in 15 years, I will tell you guys right now, I'm not going to do it. I flat out won't do it. Don't care what it is. I'm not going to do it. I will live a regular human life. I'll die when I'm supposed to. I just don't. I can't. I don't like the game. I don't like the premise. I don't like the implications, and I just rather not be a part of it. It's the same thing. Same thing with the vaccination shit. Still won't do it.
Wait till you meet your first grandchild.
Yeah. I can still change it. I can tell them exactly why.
And
it's a merit
wait
of
till
moral
you meet
ethics
your
is what
first
it is.
grandchild.
Yeah, but then that's I get your point.
Wolf has to be converted very slowly. I know this over time.
Very slowly. And here's the thing: is like it's not a matter. I see the benefit. I 100% see the benefit, and I get your point. I think that's probably true. First grandchild, first child, 100%. Like I'm not going to fight that. At the same time, I just see it's very much like a moral thing, ethical thing for me. And specifically with the last 2 years, like I saw a lot of people totally just disregard medical code. And I think the same thing will happen here. I think people will just be so excited they'll disregard it. And had I have listened to everybody who told me that it wouldn't be a problem 2 years ago, then I'd be in the question of, I guess I'd be in that group of, I was wrong. And maybe I am, but so far I'm not.
Well, let me ask you this: when you're 80 years old, I don't know what life expectancy is right now. Let's say it's 80. If you've made it this far, maybe it's 80 or 85 or something like that.
85 for him.
Your age, right? And let's say you're really healthy.
Yeah.
And you can play tennis, maybe even go skiing and dance with your wife and your grandchildren. Mm-hmm. Do you want to drop dead tomorrow? Wouldn't you like to extend that out further?
I mean, theoretically, yeah, but who's to say I don't live to be 120? I mean,
if you live to be 120, Wolf, it's probably because of the very things we're talking about.
Or some form of it, at least watered down a little bit. Maybe you're not into the cloud, but you're going to be taking advantage of medical technology that's available.
And that's what I'm fine with that. Like medically, like base medically, totally.
So there's
fine.
the threshold issue you're talking about here.
Like it's once it moves to the manipulation of personality, dexterity, your brain, intelligence. They who have versus they who don't. Because I would consider myself in the they have group, and I came from the they that don't group, so I understand the transition periods. I just see it as like an ethical thing, because it's like, okay, well, I'm no different than someone who has no money. I'm no more intelligent than someone who has graduated or not graduated from college, because intelligence is a metric that is so skewed these days by things that are not indicators of intelligence that it's almost nonsensical. It's like, okay, so I read a book that makes me more intelligent than someone? Not necessarily. I mean, what did I get from the book? And there's so many people who have degrees these days that don't use them, and it's indicated and shown in actions and decisions. So it's a very broad spectrum of like, it's the theys that and theys that do not have argument, and I don't like going into that argument. It perturbs me.
Well,
it's like
ultimately human beings and biological entities in general, it's about wanting to survive. It's in our code. Yeah. We want to survive. We want to live. We want to continue our generations, one way, shape, or another. And it seems evident to me that as we become more educated, urbanized, civilized, we're not replacing ourselves at all. Mm-hmm. So if we're going to survive as a species, we got to do something different. And we've got to use our brains and our technologies, the things we create, to help us move into that future. I mean, it just seems totally logical to me. Yeah, I'm not saying that we're not going to be on some bumpy roads. I think I mentioned that earlier. The volatility we're going to see ahead is going to be extreme, especially for those that do not have right now. Mm-hmm. And that's horrible, because you want to bring everybody with you, right? You want everybody to be engaged and everybody to be benefited.
Let's put it this way. My brother has a disability. There's certain things medically that he can't take. And during the discussion the last 2 years, everyone totally forgot that there's certain people that can't take those things. Just ignored it. And the way I look at it is, if we're going to play this game of living indefinitely, but then throwing out ethics because it's inevitable, that is so dystopian. That is the most
Nobody's
dystopian,
saying to throw out ethics.
I'm not saying you are. I'm saying that I don't think any of you are. I think the overwhelming group shift, groupthink mentality, unfortunately, will be that, because it was shown to a high degree in 2020, 2021, and even today, until people who pushed a narrative realized their narrative was no longer useful. I just don't think that power base is going to shift much. It might shift slightly. And I hate to say this because it makes me sound like I'm cynical. I'm really not. I agree with you, Dave, when it comes to where we are today. There's a specific book, I've talked about it before and I can't remember it right now, but I'll get it to you via email, that talks about how we are in the best possible time scientifically and historically in all of history. Yeah. Like 100%. There's no arguing it. You can look at it measurably. You can look at it through a quality of living. You can even measure it to some degree with wealth, even though it's really hard to do that going backwards because the metrics are different. With that being said, like, I agree with you 100%. My skepticism and my concern kind of just aligns with, you look at someone like Anthony Fauci, right? The guy was wrong about everything to do with AIDS, 100%. He was given awards for it, and then he ran the whole thing that happened 2 years ago. You think that was an accident? I mean, like, it's just too calculated. And I'm not saying people are controlling things. I'm not saying Charles Schwab controls everything. I just think that there are certain things where it's like, why wouldn't you do that? If I was in that power position, I would do that. You know,
as far as power goes, though, Wolf, I would say that what we're talking about, whether any form of technology to include what is going to be required to reach longevity escape velocity. Mm-hmm. When it's new, it's not manufactured or provided at scale, and any new thing, looms, automobiles, or whatever, if you go to, I was just at Henry Ford Museum, which is the automobile museum in Michigan. It's interesting. You look at the first cars, they were way more expensive than cars like 8 to 10 years later, when they achieve some manufacturing scale. So yeah, initially the people that can afford this stuff, because it's not available at scale, they don't have economies of scale in making this stuff provided, though you're going to have resources to afford that stuff. But Ed's made this point a few times. Eventually, and I don't think it's going to take too long, everybody's going to be able to access this stuff. So I don't think it's just going to be the rich and powerful that can get this. We've shown time after time with all this new stuff, the vaccines, you're not a fan, that's cool, but everybody could get them. It wasn't like just the rich people could insulate themselves from this stuff. So
let me
the same thing's going to happen with this.
I'm not saying I'm not a fan of vaccines. I'm not a fan of them being politicized. Like, I was
it was mismanaged. Agreed, 100%.
Yeah, absolutely. Horrifically
mismanaged.
mismanaged. I'm not a Fauci fan. Never was. Didn't like how it was ran, administered. The whole response should have and could have been much different and much better. Agree. Yeah. But the cool thing here is, just like you mentioned that word, that great E word, the Enlightenment. That is the antidote to so many of these problems here, is that we remember those principles. It's the antidote 100%. To the pyramid society. It's the antidote to the extremes on the right and the left. And the antidote are conversations like this. I keep coming back to that, because if we can figure this out, okay, others can figure this out and chart a wiser course. We all just have to be vigilant and not let the hidden hand come down. We need to ask questions. You're right. We've got to question authority, question it all the time. That is the antidote. Criticism is the antidote to stupidity. So, you're right to raise these questions. But also, I have to come down on the side of, I'm excited about these things. I hope they come to pass because they have the potential to really make things better for every human being on planet Earth.
Education goes a long way. And
100%.
So Wolf, I don't know your backstory. I know a bit of Chris's backstory, kind of from farmland in the Midwest. Doesn't sound like, Wolf, you came from great means. Ed and I can share, did not.
We did not.
Yeah, I'll just leave it at that. And I will share with you that the way we were able to do something different and maybe get into the wide side of the diamond there was through education. That was the only great liberator for us, and reading books. And I can tell you that Gutenberg, I'm sure, the printing press put scribes out of work. Right? And that was turmoil, and people didn't like that. And because of that, we have great opportunity we wouldn't otherwise have. This is another version of that on steroids.
Yeah. And I hope so. I do.
And with going to Dave's, he mentioned Gutenberg. And again, after Gutenberg and the printing press, there was some social upheaval after that. You had, the ability to put those 95 theses that were on the church door and print those things. So you had the 30 Years' War and things like that. There was some upheaval. And we're seeing that 100%. Now kind of like that with social media. But after things calmed down, it became a huge net positive, for planet Earth that we were able to, the Industrial Revolution, and now, and create new cures for diseases, and people are living longer now. So again, there's a huge net benefit.
And I talk about the great amplifier, right? And we think about social media. We've talked about that a bit, and it causes depression in teenage girls.
Absolutely,
it sends people down echo chambers, causes all kinds of problems. The world was just like that at the time that this country was being formed. The pamphleteers and the insane things political parties would say about each other. Yeah. It is exactly where we are now, only everybody has access to it through social media.
Newspapers, all newspapers were politicized. You'd read one. There was no such thing as objective news around at the time of our country's founding in those first few years. So everything was politicized. We can do better, but the technology gives us the chance to do better if we only utilize it properly, because I can go and I can read what somebody else thinks and think, maybe I wasn't right about that. And maybe if I'm lucky, someone will read or listen to something that I've said and said, well, Ed's causing me to think about this a little bit differently.
And I totally agree.
Ben Franklin was amongst the worst.
Totally
he was scandalous in the things that he would put out there without even under pseudonyms, right? Mm-hmm. So I'm sorry, Wolf, I stepped over.
No, totally fine. No, I totally agree with you guys. I think that it's just over time have maybe become a little jaded against the fact that you guys are right. I'm a libertarian, middle of the road. I read both sides. I see credence in both sides. I see credence in the climate change argument. I see credence in the climate change doesn't exist argument. I totally understand where people come from on this stuff. The problem is that I don't think that viewpoint is normative. I don't. It's not. If that were the case, then we would 100% be in a better place. If that were the case in 2020, they would have said, send the young people to work. Keep the older people and the people who are sick at home. They would have said that. Not a single person said that. Same thing with
I said that. I mean,
look, well, I mean, like en masse.
No, you're right. But like in my organization, we stayed open throughout the entire pandemic. Okay, mm-hmm. I only furloughed people when the government made it so lucrative for my community to do so, and I let them spend halftime at work. Everybody kept coming to work because I didn't want to see a diminution of that work ethic, that sense of mission, and that whole, I want to be part of what's happening in the city of Hazel Park slide away by people just staying home and not doing anything. So
awesome.
There's a lot of people. I don't disagree with anything that you've just said. That's how I consider myself, someone with a slightly libertarian bent who listens to both sides of the argument, but after listening, I kind of come down like I am definitely a techno-optimist, but I'm a techno-optimist that keeps my eyes open to those possible problems that we could have with the technology, and that's how we all have to approach it.
Yeah. And we have them now. We have them right now, 100%. And Wolf, you'll appreciate this. I mean, you look at, let's just say that the vaccine was helpful to infirmed or older people, or some group of our population. It was helpful for them, right? Well, now the money motive is like, push it down, push it down, push it down. Let's have 5-year-olds take it that are virtually no risk whatsoever. And the only reason that they're being pushed on it is so these guys can make money. Wrong, 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 wrong. And that just supports your point. There's an opportunity for this to go haywire.
Mm-hmm. And yeah, I mean, as I said before, if all three of you guys could represent like the decision making collective on this, I'm on for it. I'm all for it.
Can we get that going? Can we make that happen?
That's right.
If you guys could be the board, I'm all for it. Like, but I wish with my deepest Star Wars, Star Trekky nerdiness part of me that I wish that it goes that way. And hopefully, who knows, maybe it will.
Well,
so
on this podcast, we've just formed the Common Sense Enlightenment Party. So,
ooh, I like that.
I like that.
The CEP.
The CEP as opposed to the CCP. I like that.
Yeah, they're definitely the bad guys.
It's a little close, yeah.
Just a little. Mike can play the marketing at that. Bull, you got anything else to add? You got any insights? Some bull wisdom?
This is one of those conversations that can go on forever, and especially since we're going to live virtually forever, that we could just continue this at any time, right?
Yeah.
Right.
But no, I think that this, Ed, you've mentioned it a couple of times. One of the reasons Wolf and I decided we wanted to do this kind of thing is, number one, it gives us an actual platform, a public platform to have the debates we are usually having over a glass of whiskey, which is always good. But it also gives people the ability to have conversations about this stuff. And the greatest thing about these platforms, as bad as they can be from a social media standpoint, that we talk about the negatives all the time, the other side of the coin is it gives individuals like us the opportunity to not just talk about this, but to disseminate the ideas. Mm. And that's the only thing that helps us grow. That's the only thing that course corrects us on the way to our either light or dark future, right? We have to have the ability to communicate openly about this stuff.
Yeah, good thought. And Wolf and Bull, thank you for you put a lot of effort to get this out there, and it's appreciated, and it's been fun to be involved with it.
And I have to second that. First of all, great to see you, my wonderful friend Dave Porter. It's just good to see you always, anytime. And again, Wolf and Bull, thank you so much for doing what you're doing. Thank you for inviting me. You know, it's fun just to spend a few hours having a great conversation with some smart people about some cool topics. You know, it's kind of one of those things that make life worth living.
Yeah,
totally. Yeah. Couldn't agree more. Yeah. Well, Bull, unless you have something else to add, I think I'll go ahead and wrap it up. Cool. Well, that wraps up the episode. If you happen to like what you saw, like what you heard, go ahead and give us a follow on Instagram. You can also find us on Instagram, on YouTube by subscribing. We have content that comes out every Thursday auditorially, so on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Anchor.fm, and on every Friday when it comes to YouTube. Before we wrap up, Dave, Ed, if you want to, is there any ways our listeners can support you?
Just continue to subscribe to the Wolf and Bull podcast. And absolutely. Look, you know what? There's no way you could really support me in what I do other than, I encourage everyone to, like I said, this is a great podcast. Watch your podcast, read books, read David Sinclair, read Ray Kurzweil, read Pete Diamandis, read David Brin. There's so many science fiction, read Neil Stevenson. And another guy who's no longer with us, the late, great Ian M. Banks and his culture novels. All those things are phenomenal, and they're all thought-provoking. So I would encourage you to read and educate yourself. And again, gentlemen, thank you so much for inviting me.
Of course, anytime. We'd love to do it again. But thank you to the audience. Thanks to the Wolf and Bull family. And we can't wait to see you guys next week.